Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a DIY Dollar Tree inspirational Easter decor. We're going to do 3 projects. The first one, we're going to use this wreath form that's new at the Dollar Tree, but I bought 2 specifically because they were wonky. We're going to use some printable paper, and I'll share it with you in the description box. I'm going to use scrap wood rulers. You can use a real ruler, you can use a cross, whatever you want to do, I'll show you. And for one project, we're going to use 3 of these crosses. Now, if you have 4, you can do the project, you can skip the cross. These are old. I tried to use items that have been around for a while that you may have in your stockpile. I don't have any new items in this except the lilies, but the lilies have been out for a while, but they're new to me. So I'm going to use the Easter lilies and some Dollar Tree florals for the wreath. And then I'm going to use burlap for the bow. But that's what I'm saying. All stuff's been around. So I had these 2. I bought 4 of them when they first came out, or when I first found them. And 2 of them already looked egg-shaped. So I knew exactly why I was buying them and exactly what I was going to use them for. But I will tell you, they do kind of bend. Now, we have an egg-shaped wreath on our channel that we had from a couple of years ago, and if you want, that video is in my Easter DIY playlist if you want to see that. So for this, I wanted to just make a simple Easter lily wreath with a cross in the middle, and I wanted to share it with you, but you could use whatever flowers you want. Honestly, I think the fact that I wanted to do that mix of an egg and a cross just to kind of encompass all of the Easter spiritual things that happen. So what I'm doing to these flowers is I'm taking the petals, because they kind of look like they might have been squished in the box, and I'm just, like you would do curling ribbon, I'm just using the edge of my scissor to basically curl them down, curl them up. If the ones that are folded completely down flat and have a crease in them, I'm just using this method to uncrease them to make them more flower-like. Now, I will tell you that when you do this with Dollar Tree florals, they often fray on the end, but that's not a big deal. Just take your scissor and clean up all the fraying, and you're back to square one. So now, it's just a matter of design. So the reason I picked the large wreath form is because these flowers were really big, and I thought that they would just swallow up the size of the other egg. You wouldn't even tell that it was an egg anymore, I think. So I went with the big wreath, but if you have smaller florals and only have the smaller wreath, then obviously that's what you'll go for. For these, I was originally thinking I would leave the stems on and just make it easy, but you know what? It's easier to me to just take the stems off, glue the flowers down exactly where you want them. I did want 2 on each side. I wanted it to be very symmetrical, or as symmetrical as possible. I'm not going crazy. So I tried to put them sort of evenly spaced. As you can see, the ones on the left are a tiny bit higher, and that's okay. But for the most part, it's going to look more natural, because flowers don't always go where you tell them to in nature. So now I'm taking the leaves. Normally when we do a floral arrangement, we start with our greenery, but these lilies are so big that you definitely have to start with the flowers and just add accents of leaves. I basically was trying to treat them almost like the leaves were still on there. So I just stuck them very randomly here, there, and everywhere, just to give them a little bit more life. Now, if you don't like the shininess of the leaves, you can paint them. Just pick out a nice chalk paint. You can paint them very easily, to be honest with you. But to me, I don't mind it. It's not objectionable. So the other thing that I took was this. It's called wildflowers, but it actually just looks like lavender to me. Somebody mentioned it looks like lilacs, but maybe lilac buds, because lilacs are usually much bigger. But maybe miniature lilacs or something. I'm not really sure. But I just took them off. They were clustered in 3, so I left the 3 cluster, and I put them here and there and everywhere. So for the next thing, we're actually going to add more florals at the end, but I wanted to do is get the bow on there. I realized that I need to get the bow on there, and I need to get the cross done so that I can figure out where I want the rest of my flowers to be, if that makes any sense. So for this bow, we're going to make 3 loops, and we're not going to make a tail. It's fine. I just take 3 sections, all the same size, and I fold them in loops that are all the same size. We have there's 50,000 bow making methods in the world, and this is just number 4,327. No, I'm kidding. But I just take a piece of jute cord, I squish the middle up, and then you just separate and fluff out the loops on both sides. So now we're going to work on the cross. Now I was kind of like, what size cross do I want? Do I want it to be that big? Do I want it to be that small? You could do this with popsicle sticks if you want to. You can use one of the pre-made crosses as well. But I wanted to give you guys options on here, and I just wanted to show you what I'm doing with scraps. I know a lot of us are stuck in the house and don't have many materials to work from. So I wanted to be able to use things that they sold a while back, and hopefully you had in your stores, and that we could use. I just wanted to be able to use up whatever we had and whatever we could get free off the internet, like the printables. So I'm just cutting this where it looks even and then placing it on both sides. So I just wanted to interject here for a second. Those of you who have been around my channel for a while probably know this. Those of you who are new may not know. Those of you who have been around the world for a while or have had a lot of experience with these knives may know this, and many of you may not know. This right here is a utility knife. It has replaceable blades. How you replace the blade is you slide the handle off, and you slide the blade down this way until it's released here. Then you replace the blade and you just reassemble it exactly the opposite way that you unassembled it. They have locking mechanisms where you push down to adjust the blade, so this way the blade doesn't slide back on you while you're crafting. And if you notice, the blade is scored every half an inch or a quarter inch. I guess it would really depend on your blade. So what that is that so that you can cut a new sharp blade. This blade is sharpened all the way down the length, and each time you wear out one, and you're supposed to cut for another. But what you may not know is every one of these blades comes with a handle like this, and what this actually has a little notch in it, and I know you're not going to be able to see that notch. You might be able to. I might be able to zoom in on that notch. And what that notch does, and I'm not really sure if I can see that I'm doing it the right way, because it might be the opposite. Let me see, because I really can't see like I used to be able to. So, no, I was right the first time. So what that does is you slide that onto the blade, and that's what you use to break. And you have to make sure that this blade is on that protective piece of metal, or not below, above that protective piece of metal, because between that piece of metal and this plastic, you're going to be able to snap a whole new blade, and it's going to be a nice sharp tip here. And then this one, what I like to do is I wrap it in a piece of scrap paper and tape and throw it in the garbage. This way, just in case you shove your hand down in the garbage, you don't accidentally cut yourself. Some people have little jars that they keep them in and then dispose of the jar. You could take like a soda can and just leave it, label it marked blade tips or whatever, but dispose of it carefully. And then slide your cover back on and head back to work with a nice sharp blade. So I hope that was really helpful to a lot of people. I've actually seen people break their tips off on the counter and stuff. And the reason you want to definitely use the handle is because it'll hold the blade. It'll keep the blade from flying off. So just be careful. So what I just basically did was sanded them flat. If I had my druthers, or if I had bigger scraps, I probably would make the center part of this cross longer or the sides shorter. But what I decided to do is if I moved it down a little bit, it would just seem a little bit more in proportion. So that's what I ended up doing. So now I'm trying to decide which piece of paper that I want to use to cover this with. And I definitely wanted it to be a little gingham or buffalo check black and white because, me. And I wanted to go ahead and make sure that I put this on the back of the rulers, which is totally flat. I just used hot glue to glue the rulers together, and then I flipped it over and then just added a little extra glue to the back. So what I'm going to use for mine is spray adhesive. You can use Mod Podge, you can use Elmer's glue, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to use a dry mount spray adhesive technique. I basically sprayed the paper as well as the cross, and then very, very carefully you need to put the cross, place the cross on the paper, because once you put it down, you won't be able to move it. If you just use regular, like the spray adhesive regular, like spray the paper and then put it down, it takes longer to dry, but it is repositionable, so keep that in mind. And then what I'm doing is kind of like if it was contact paper. I'm cutting up to the intersections, up to the inside corners, basically on an angle, and I'm folding it over around the back, and this way the edges get nice and covered. On the end, I was just trimming off the backside section of paper and then using the front side section of paper to wrap around the ends. And I'm doing that for all 4 edges. Now for the first one, I ripped it and I was like, oh, really, Jeri? I was really trying really hard and I just ended up ripping, and I was like, oh, life just happens that way sometimes. Originally, I was thinking I would antique this with some paint around the edges, but I decided instead to use the word grace off of this cross. Now you could, like I said, skip the buffalo check technique and just use one of these crosses, rip their base off, and then you're good to go. But I knew I wanted to use this cross for another project coming up tonight, and I just said, okay, let me try to see if I could salvage this word grace and add it to my other project. Now it was very difficult to get off. I will not deny that. Who is accusing me of lying? Yes, it was very difficult to get off. A combination of a flathead screwdriver and pliers. Now, if I was just getting it off just to use the cross, it wouldn't be a problem. But I was trying to make sure that I didn't wreck the word grace. So I was trying to be very careful. Now, I did have to hammer it back down, and I just used my needle nose pliers there on the edge. I'm gonna end up putting it on the edge of the table so I can really hammer it out. And I just hammered it flat, and then it's good to go. And I glued it right in the middle of the cross, just like that actual cross from the Dollar Tree was. And I just love it. I used that to glue down, so if any glue came out. And if you ever glued these metal words down with hot glue, they get hot, so be mindful of that. Now we're going to take our bow, and I'm just going to adjust I readjusted the loops. I wanted them, to be even on both sides. I don't know, I'm weird. But then I tied it on to the wreath, and then I glued the cross in the middle. I'm sorry I'm having a little difficulty talking right now. Isn't it terrible? Sorry. I have to give myself grace to be able to get through this video. So then I adjusted it, made it even. It looks crooked, and then when I went to go hang it and photograph it, I ended up fixing it because I didn't realize there how crooked it was. So now I'm just taking a little bit of these flowers. I forget what they're called. I just bought them at the Dollar Tree. I really can't remember what they're called. Forgive me. But they are these pretty yellow flowers. They're actually on long stems, and I put them on both sides. Now, I am not, there's no shame in my game. I will glue the tips of those flowers down so they don't go off into another direction. And then I added the last 2 pieces of that purple. And then finally what I did was I did a hanging string. Now you could just, if your hook is big enough, you don't need a string. You could just hook the actual top of the egg. But I only have these little flat hooks on my doors from Command. So I always need a string or something to go in there. So what I did was I just took a piece big enough to go around from side to side, knotted it on both sides, glued it on both sides, and just made sure that it was hidden behind the top of the egg. And here it is, all finished, and I think it's so beautiful and classic and delicate and just everything that I want. And I can always change the bow out if, my style changes. So for the next project, we're going to take 2 of these crosses with the stands, and one cross that I got, it actually has like a stand on the back, like an easel stand. And I'm going to I already pried grace off of the one, and I'm going to pry this metal cross off the other, but don't throw it out. Be careful prying it because we're going to use it for the last project. Now these crosses, like I said, have been at the Dollar Tree for a while. Some of you may have them in your stock already. I was actually gifted some recently as well. So I'm just going to take the easel off the back. Now this particular cross with the paper on it, the big one, the paper was like hanging off the edge, and though I'm going to use the back, you can still see the paper back there. So what I just did was I peeled some of the paper off, but then I just took a piece of sandpaper and I just sanded down those edges of the paper so that it wouldn't be in the way. And which isn't like a necessary because we're going to paint it, but yeah, definitely want to do that. Now I decided to not paint mine first because I kind of wanted to create almost shadows type of effect, but you can go ahead and paint these first if you want to. All I did was I added Waverly's chalk paint in Waverly's wax in antique to the white cross, and then I added white chalk paint and antique to the middle big cross, and then I took that brush when it was all done and I just put some blotches on the brown cross. I've just flipped all these over so there's not like any huge to do, and I just basically glued them where the big cross is suspended in the middle. To me, it kind of gave like that miraculous he is risen type of thing, because that cross is not on the ground. That is the godly, I don't know. I philosophized it in my head. It sounded really good. Hopefully you guys get what I'm saying. So like I said, I'm just taking a stiff brush. This is from the Dollar Tree. I will tell you the story of this brush really quick while you see me just brush on this thing. When you see me brush this paint on, it looks like stained wood. It looks like a light stained wood. But this is a paintbrush that didn't get washed right away. And it's very, very stiff and almost full of old paint. But there's purposes for those. That's almost like a cheap chip brush. And it gives you a lot of really good texture. Like that you would get for wood graining, and that's what I liked about this brush. That's why I chose this brush especially. It's very stiff because, again, it was not washed properly. And then after I got a good coat of, like, quote-unquote wood graining, I went back with a couple of dark accents to almost feel like darker grains or darker knots coming through. Now for this, I took the exact same paintbrush. I did not clean it off. And I dipped it in some Waverly white chalk paint because I didn't care if it had brown on it because we're going to go back over it with brown. And I did the same thing. I didn't get a good full coverage. I just dry brushed wherever with this chippy brush. And then I took my sandpaper. Now, it does dry quickly, but didn't dry that quickly. But that's okay. I took my sandpaper, and my sandpaper, like, spread it around and took some away and made some rough spots. And then I took the brown, same brown that we used before, and I did the same technique I did before. But because it's going over a white chalk paint, and it was originally like the MDF color underneath, you can notice that I'm getting a very different look for both of these crosses. Okay? Now, like I said, I wanted to add shading and shadowing, so I kind of was trying to do that after they were glued. But if you're not confident with your hand, then you can go ahead and just definitely paint these before you put them together. Okay? Or whatever you're using, paint and put before you put together. Now, I have seen people use a wooden cross form from the Crafter Square. I was not fortunate enough to get one of those. I do have some wooden crosses from other resources in my kit that I might pull out for the rest of some Easter DIYs, but I wanted to use these for this for 100% sure. So now, just like that first project, I went ahead and I added some dark striations to the middle cross so that it could be it could also look more like it was actually wood. And then I just took that same dirty brush that had some white on it and some of the antique wax, and I put it over that brown cross just to give it some dimension. Now the last thing that I'm going to do, and I didn't mention in the beginning, was I'm going to take this believe sign, and this believe sign is from Christmas. But originally what I was going to use was the blessing signs from Easter. But when I realized that I had this still, I was like, for sure, I knew I wanted to use it. And here's how this project looks together. It is so simple, but I love the way it turned out. And for the last project, again, simple. We're just going to take that cross, that corrugated cross, and I'm going to try to make the hole a tiny bit bigger. You could use a nail, you could use a screw. I'm just using a mini screwdriver that I have. I first tried to use a skewer. Jerry, wood versus metal. I don't know what I was thinking. So I just took my tiny Phillips head screwdriver. I put up a piece of scrap wood underneath it, and I just tried to make the hole a tiny bit bigger. It's just going to make it that much easier to thread the string through. Now, not only in the last project that I didn't tell you needed the word believe, but in this project I forgot to tell you that you need beads and string. Oh, goodness. I need help. So I'm just going to keep going until I can get the hole big enough. I'm trying to now fix the little burr from the bottom nail. I didn't want anybody to catch their finger on it. So I basically tried to keep it corrugated while I hammered it down with that piece of wood. And you could see I had a little bit of difficulty. But if you guys are doing this off camera because you're not a YouTuber, it'll be much easier for you to just get something like a skewer, put it under there, and then you can hammer that even whatever parts that you need to do. Okay. Yours might be fine. You might not need to do that at all. So I'm taking a piece of cotton twine and I am putting it pretty long through the hole and I'm folding it in half. And then I'm taking and putting a knot around just above the cross. I'm just doing an overhand knot with both strings. And now these beads are from Amazon. Now I showed you my jar of beads from the Dollar Tree. We've used Dollar Tree beads so many times on the channel, but I just wanted this to be a really quick and easy project for me. So you can go ahead and paint your beads. You can buy these beads on Amazon. I got, I don't know, something like a couple of hundred beads for $12.99, and it came with cording. There's lots of really inexpensive resources for beads, just if you're interested. These are wood. You don't have to do anything to them. They're unfinished, so you can leave them unfinished or you can stain them, whatever. But what I wanted to do, and many of you know, because we've talked before, that I was raised Catholic, that and I taught catechism for many, many years, that I wanted to do sort of like a broken rosary. And I didn't want to do it like a political statement or a statement against my my former religion. I wanted to do it because I, for 100% literally, have a broken piece of rosary that was my mom's. I have it put away because it's a very precious treasure to me. But I was thinking in honor of her that I would do this. And really, it's just one decade of beads. There's not even at the end decade. So I'm putting on the first big bead, then 3 beads, and then another big bead, and then 10. And that's to represent each one of the beads in a rosary. If you don't know, represents a prayer or 2. So that's just what I've decided to make mine as. And then I'm ending it with a tassel. And it's funny because the tassel, every time I make a tassel, I think of my dad because it's the technique of how to tie off the tassel. And so this is just, I don't know, it just means a lot to me to make this. So we've done this on our channel 1,000 gazillion times, but you just wrap a bunch of string around your hand. I've beaded all of the beads through both strings through all of the beads, knotted the end, and then I'm taking the middle of the loops that I just wrapped around my hand and I'm knotting it, and I'm going to bury the knot underneath all of that string. Okay, and I'm actually going to incorporate the strings of that knot into the tassel. So now I'm just going to use this technique we've 1,000 times. Sorry guys if you're watching on repeat. I basically take a piece of jute. I'm showing you jute because you can see it on camera better. And I'm laying it with the loop up towards the top of the tassel. And then I'm taking a string and I'm starting the string at the bottom of the tassel going up to where I want to wrap it. And I'm wrapping over the piece of jute as well as over the starter piece of string. And I'm just going to wrap it as many times as I want to. Take the end, put it back between the loop, and then pull the jute loop underneath all of that knot, and that will hide the knot. Bury the lead. It'll bury the lead. Then you just trim to fit basically how you want them to look. Because some people like their tassels long, some people like them short. You could even comb it out with a comb and make it fuzzy. That would be cute too. And there it is. And I'm going to think of my mommy every time that I see it. I just will. So that's it for these projects. I hope you guys really enjoyed them. If you guys have any questions at all, leave them in the comments down below. Please don't forget to share this video with friends and family. Anybody you know might be interested in making one or all of these projects. And if you haven't yet, click subscribe, and when you do, a little bell will pop up. When you ring that bell, YouTube will let you know whenever I upload a new video. And as always, you guys take care. God bless. And I'll see you next time. I did have to hammer the bottom piece, kind of got like a little wonky. And where the little nail was attached was like a little burr, and I didn't want anybody to catch their finger on it. So I just took, oh, we're not doing that yet.